when it comes to policies, yeah, people just, if they haven't lived in South Africa, they just have no idea of what goes on. So we have these two policies effectively. Broad-based black economic empowerment basically means that any business you want to conduct, race becomes a really strong determining factor. And if who you buy from, as soon as your company gets over a very, very small size, you must buy from people that are black owned. You must sell to people that are black owned. You must employ people of a certain race. There are race quotas for what your employers must. Your management team must be a certain race, and it's absolutely insane beyond. And in an extreme example, so let's go to something that really happens. You can Google it, but it just shows the craziness. So now we find ourselves in a children's senior, 17, 18-year-old in a senior representative rugby team playing for your province. You're now playing for your province, and what happens is now there's a quota. So on the pitch at all times, there must be 10 black people, there must be 5 white people. Now, in one of the senior games, now what happens is the subs have been used up. All of a sudden, one of the black players gets injured, and there isn't another black player to put on the pitch. So they take one of the white players and bring on an extra white player, and the team wins the game but gets disqualified. Because even though it was replacing an injured player, they had too many people of the wrong race, and therefore literally got disqualified from a senior level competition. That is the insanity of where we are with race in South Africa. That's what we're fighting against. We're not fighting against, hang on a second, apartheid was terrible, and we need to create a fairer society, because apartheid was terrible, and we absolutely need to create a fairer society. It's the insanity with which we do that. How do we create a fairer society? By creating a vibrant economy which creates work, by creating education, by uplifting people, so that ultimately we create opportunities for people, and we get away from our terrible past. We don't do it by taking the very worst aspects of apartheid and repeating them again ad nauseum, which is exactly where we are now, and that's what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah. Is there a push at all at the federal level? So what is the history of some of these bills as far as so you had the National Party. There was this transition from the National Party to the ANC under Mandela. And when did these policies come into effect? They came into effect in the 90s. And is there a talk at all at the federal level of actually trying to get rid of these, or because they're to me the root of a lot of the stuff, which is it's very anti-meritocratic, right? It basically It's race based. It's not meritocratic, and it's racist. If you want to point at a policy, it's purely racist. These things. Is there any talk of scrapping them? Probably not, because the ANC benefits the most from it.
Exactly the opposite. They're being strengthened every year. So every year, right now, they're talking about strengthening. So these policies came in under Thabo Mbeki. They came in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they what happens is it's a classic case of left wing politics. So what happens is you come with this idea which kind of isn't economically sound, but ideologically you convince yourself that we have to do this because it's the right thing to do. You implement your policy, it's a total disaster. It has exactly the opposite effect of what you want. You should sit down and go, okay, well, that didn't work. But you sit down and go, well, we just didn't do enough of that. So then you ramp up the regulations a bit more, and then you sit and then you come along and you say, oh, well, hang on a second, the boards of our top 100 companies are all 50% white, but actually white people make up 16% of the population. Well, then we must need to have stricter laws. We must have fines. We must threaten people with prison. Nobody sits down and says, well, what percentage of university degrees went to accountants? Do you know what I mean? And logically speaking, well, hang on a second. If we have a really fair system, then the sort of composition of financial senior financial chief financial officers should be representative of the creme de la creme of the people that came out of accounting. We don't have any of that. We just rounded, well, there you go. Why is it? Well, white people are just continuing to be racist. This is the system. Let's do more of it. Well, that's not strict enough. So right now we're busy ramping up BEE again. We've just changed last year affirmative action to literally impose in every single industry. We now have quotas. If you have a fish and chip shop, there is a quota for what your race composition must be for your staff in your fish and chip shop. If it happens to be a mine, you have a different quota. If it happens to be a hotel, and you literally have to go into your industry and say, in my workforce, how should and actually now it's at senior level, and my junior staff must be in this ratio, my middle management must be in this ratio, my senior management, my shareholders must be in this ratio. It's absolutely insane. Now, how on earth do you run businesses in that environment? I mean, it's insanity, total insanity.
And this billionaire class of ANC associated politicians or business leaders, they, from what I had understood, they made their fortunes predominantly by getting appointed to some of these boards that needed to comply with some of this stuff, or getting their finger into. Yeah, they got on not because of merit. They got on because they were black, and they were like, okay, cool. Now we need to have a black board member, and we have this one that can nominally serve, and we pay them. Is that accurate?
No, absolutely. So what do you end up? You start off with a system where you've got all of these boards. You create a set of rules that you now must have X amount of black people on the board. Otherwise, you can't do business with the state. You can't do business with anybody else. Now suddenly, then you have this elite class of people who say, well, look, I'm the, so you have, Cyril Ramaphosa is the lead shareholder in McDonald's. At the end of the day, at one point, I could have my numbers right now. Cyril Ramaphosa is now our president, who was a union leader, so should be the last person to be sat on something like 250 boards. Now, is rich beyond your wildest imagination. I mean, who could possibly sit on 250 boards? What are you there for? You're not there for anything other than to tick a box. So you create this system where we create the rules, then you fill the rules, and you have these people who are just, it's all about extraction. Now, how do we create a system where we extract value out of the economy? And therefore, and that's had a totally destructive effect, because what happens with people, now you're deterring entrepreneurship. You're not starting new companies. The name of the game is, well, how do I leech off somebody else's hard work? How do I leverage my race to and actually what we've seen, and one of the big frustrations, is all of a sudden white people who've been excluded from the economy start to do better and better because they're forced into entrepreneurial environments. They can't rely on government, so they become increasingly innovative, increasingly competitive, because the market makes them so. They literally can't survive otherwise. And on the opposite effect, you're creating this class of people who just become less, never build anything, never do anything, because actually what they end up being is a means of extraction, and that's how our economy is layered. And obviously, again, that's a generalization. There's some brilliant black people out there who are great. It's not everybody, but you have this elite political caste who are parasites. At the end of the day, we have tens of thousands of parasites in our economy, and we find when we looked at state capture, as you say, which is just theft, we find people paying 20,000 rand for a wooden handled mop, which is like 100 rands. I mean, what's 20,000 rand in dollars? $1,000.
$1,000, yeah.
For a wooden handled mop. I mean, it's why? Well, they bought it for $1 and they marked it up $999. They were the preferred supplier. You had to buy from them because they were black. It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah. It makes. There's it's analogous with DEI in the States, where you have, ironically, the group that is it's white men who are excelling under DEI because they're the only ones who have taken, received, and are able to recalibrate from negative feedback. And if you're in one of the protected classes that functions under DEI, if you are a lesbian, black, who knows what, and you've never gotten critical feedback in your life, then as soon as you get into the workforce, you wind up with this somebody telling you that your work product's not good, and you take it as a personal attack on yourself, and you think it's based on race, and they're just like, no, what you've done is not good. So what's happening in the US with DEI and these Fortune 500 companies is they're actually hiring more white men, particularly that came out of the military, because they're the only ones that can take constructive feedback. And it's what you're describing with white South Africans here. And yeah, so what is I think the last question I'm left with is that, like, this group of talented white South Africans, I was looking at the demographic trends before we started. they're still emigrating. There is sort of like a hollowing out of people in their let's say 20s to 40s that have left or that have a second passport and are like actively looking at leaving. Is that accurate?
No, look, absolutely. The popular, I think the statistics are something scary. Like, and look, and we should say it's not just white people that are leaving; skilled people are leaving.
Yeah.
Indian, coloured, black. We're hollowing out skilled people because effectively you're sitting in this environment where our currency is worthless. Particularly if you're from the look, it is slightly different. If you're from the ethnic minorities, white, coloured, or Indian, then you are disadvantaged compared to other people, and you start to look and say, well, never mind me, I may be fine, but what about my children? What world do they grow up in? At the end of the day, it becomes really difficult for now that they can't play for the sports team because they're the wrong colour. They can't get into university because they're the wrong colour. They can't get a job in certain sectors because they're the wrong colour. And eventually, at some point, you go, well, look, I could just go live somewhere else, and I don't have any of this, and that causes the great failing because the state thing is, well, hang on a second, but you benefited from apartheid, and now obviously there's almost nobody left that was voting for apartheid in the workforce with 30 years past, more than a generation past that, and it's absolutely insane. So if you want to somehow have a quota against 70-year-old men, then fair enough, but actually to be discriminating against children that were born 25 years after apartheid finished, is crazy. And of course, people are leaving en masse. And as you know, there's a ratio between skilled labour and unskilled labour. So we've got this massive vat of unskilled labour, which we just can't absorb into our workforce. So we have unemployment rate at about 45%, and amongst youngsters up nearly 70%. It's catastrophic, and it's entirely self-inflicted. South Africa has got mineral wealth, it's got assets, it's got space, it's got infrastructure,
amazing weather.
World-class institutions, which are all getting degraded, but I mean, they're kind of still there. We've got a massive rail network, universities, mineral wealth, probably more than most other nations on earth. South Africa doesn't have to be a poor country. It's vast. It's 1 million square hectares. And we've got a population of 70 million. I mean, it's South Africa should be absolutely sailing, and it's not purely because of self-inflicted policy. South Africa is a man-made disaster.